Today we have we're going to talk a little bit about Brego Garcia, some updates on that. Votorama starts like right now, which is where which could go for the next 2 days, where they're pulling up amendments and so we'll talk about that. And We're going to talk a little bit about the bill, and just really go through the week. If you guys have questions, just dump them in the chat. I'll see if I can catch them. It's very quick, this chat.
Yeah, yeah, it
Uh,
could go by quickly.
yeah.
Mhm.
So Lisa, how you been? How's everything going?
Um,
How you feeling
well,
about this political moment?
yeah, I mean, there's compartmentalized parts of your life, right? Where you
Hmm.
continue to try to function like a normal human being and spend time with your family and even do the things you do that are non-political, and which is really important and healthy for everybody to be doing, because the political side of things is it's so hard, and it's still coming at us so quickly. It feels like it's a little less rapid fire than it was in the first 3 months, but it feels like the stakes keep getting higher,
Yeah.
with the things that we're talking about, whether it's, the deportations or the budget or the Supreme Court rulings. There's just, yeah, some incredibly consequential stuff happening. So on
Yeah.
that front, not so great.
Not so great. I know. I mean, yeah, it's absurd. It's an absurdist sort of world. And I was writing Winners and Losers, which we put out on Mondays, and I always write them on Fridays, which is hard because in the past few weeks, we've literally launched a war over the weekend that was then finished by Monday for the most part. Um, that is just that thinking about that is wild. And it does feel like, I mean, the news cycle has been crazy for decades, but the last 10 years have been really, I don't know, culturally different, I think. But the last 3 weeks, it feels like all of that news is sort of trickling into our actual real daily lives.
Yeah,
When you see people on the street, or you see, you know, a black SUV drive down the street, and you think, who's that coming for?
yeah, yeah.
Um, that's a very real thing.
Yeah, and I was having, speaking of the black SUVs and people being abducted, I was talking with someone earlier about this, that we have these masks, almost always men,
Yep.
coming in groups and refusing to show identification a lot of the time, because some of the time they don't have identification, because these are now people being hired, um, to do this work, who are not actual, um, government full-time employees.
Yeah.
Um, if if a group of masked men abducted me and were refusing to show any identification, at this point, how do we know? I mean, what an opportunity for
Yeah.
a group of, I mean, not that these aren't pretty awful humans that are doing this, but truly a criminal element to be able to abduct people, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
No. And they're starting to find that some people are going out on their own and doing this, who are with no ties to ICE, or law enforcement. And how do you know? And you're not supposed to question them either.
Right.
Um, it,
Yeah.
it's it's rough. And Sandra Tubbs in the chat says, I want to know how to change this, and I we'll get to that throughout this. But we always try, like, it's not enough to just talk through this stuff.
Yeah.
There has to be action, and I think, I'm still hopeful. I still have hope. We'll talk more hope at the end, so that we end on a high note. But I want to. This is a good place to shift to Abrego Garcia,
Yeah.
because that there's some crazy stuff coming out. Can you walk us through the latest? What's happening right now?
Yeah, sure. So Kilmer Abrego, we know was abducted and then deported to uh, El Salvador to this horrific prison, is probably the nicest thing you could call it,
Yep.
concentration camp. And, uh, in defiance of court orders, he was not being brought back. He's finally been brought back to the United States, and he's now been charged um, basically with human trafficking. For what he's accused of is giving people rides from Texas to somewhere else in the United States who are undocumented. This is something he was questioned about years ago, and no charges were ever brought. But now, because of the humiliation that the Trump administration is trying to avoid, they are digging back, trying to find anything they can. And to take this in a terrible step further, they have now, with, and this just blows such a hole in their facade of we're doing these kidnappings and expedited deportations for public safety reasons, because they have released someone from prison who is going to be the star witness against Garcia, who has been in jail 3 times, one of the times on gun charges because he was firing off a weapon in a residential neighborhood. He has been deported, um, I guess 5 times, because he's come into the country 6 times. But we're gonna let this guy out on the streets because in exchange for being released, he is willing to testify against Abrego, Garcia. So, the idea that this is any kind of legitimate, um, there's such a self-interest, for this guy. You're gonna get out of prison if you're willing to say what we need you to say,
Y-
in court. Don't know how that's gonna end up holding up, but the other piece of this story is that Garcia is so concerned about another snap deportation that even though he was granted the right to be basically out on bail until these next proceedings happen, he's free. Um, he's his attorney on Kilmar's behalf has asked to keep him detained. Please don't let me out of this facility because the Trump administration, different parts of it are saying different things. One part of the administration is saying we absolutely are going to keep him in the United States because we want to be able to prosecute him for this. I don't know if it's trumped up or not, but
Right.
something that there was no reason to prosecute him 3 years ago. And another portion of the government is saying, "We wanna kick this person out as soon as we possibly can." So, he's now afraid to leave detention for fear that he's once again going to be deported.
It, I mean, and this brings up two kind of similar points. And one is that, first of all, it's a mess. This is a mess. And it's, there's no untangling any of this. It's just shattering the glass. You can't put this back together. Like the agencies aren't exactly communicating and or they are, but they want different things. And two different sets of people want to have different ideas about how evil they would like to be and in what manner. Um, and I think that's a feature of this administration, first of all. It's a
Certainly a feature of Stephen Miller.
Certainly, it's a fucking mess. It's just absolutely a mess. Um, and the second thing is that I think is actually related. None of this is meant to solve a particular problem. It's only meant to create theater on behalf of Donald Trump,
Right.
right? That's why it's a mess because you have to guess what's going to make him titillated. right? What is going to move him over and what is going to make him not upset? And that's what autocracy is, right? It is creating policy and action to soothe the ego of one person,
One
one
person,
percent.
and as you said, to create, political theater, that is fear-based, right?
Yeah,
We're supposed to be afraid to speak out. We're supposed to be afraid to live our daily lives if you're a person with brown skin, and you're supposed to be afraid of
yep,
people with brown skin,
yep,
if you are white. So, it is a I if people are afraid, they're easier to control. And
yep,
that's
yep.
authoritarianism.
Yeah, you stop speaking out, and from the chat, this is one thing we always say: you can't obey in advance. You can't just say yes before the question is asked. You have to continue to say no. If you have any ability to say no, to kick on the brakes to anything, then that's what you do. Um, and that I know it doesn't sound like we want these big, broad solutions. We want to just cut through all of this with a knife and be done with it. And that's not how this works.
No.
We have to do this work every single day, and you have to call it out. And that, speaking of political theater, we weren't really going to talk about this, but it's something to keep an eye on this week. I think, what's he calling it? The DeSantis Everglades prison
Oh my god. Yeah.
that's opening this week. And I saw somebody mention this, and it was such a great point that the next time there's a hurricane and your community is destroyed or in need, or you're without fresh water, or they have no resources for you, just remember how quickly they were able to build a prison in the middle of the fucking Everglades.
Right. Yeah.
Just remember
Funny
that.
funny how, that money can be found if you want to we're gonna talk some about the budget. If you want to, um, massively explode the budget for ICE,
Yep.
or you want to have a dramatic increase in the Department of Defense budget, that money can be found. But
Yeah.
apparently it needs to be, and if you want to give a massive tax break to the very wealthiest people in America, that money can always be found, and right now it's gonna be found on the backs of Medicaid and SNAP recipients, but that's not even really true because they're going to the Republican Party, who once upon a time cared about a balanced budget, is now perfectly happy to add $5 trillion to the national debt.
Yeah. Well, they want it balanced. They just want it balanced on the plate of the rich people. That's
Yeah.
where the balance is found. MJ in the chat says that it's alligator Alcatraz. That's what they're calling it. And
Oh, right, I saw the picture of alligators wearing MAGA hats or something over the
what a bunch of
weekend. Yeah,
buttholes.
that
I
this
hate
is
those
funny,
people.
right?
I mean, that's the thing. It's theater, and it's this sort of soothing thing. She says it opens Wednesday, and she's in South Florida. MJ, I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe when we repost, you can comment on the comments section, or here. Um, we'll be covering that this week for sure. It's also, it's one of those things that, as producers and the people who are trying to cover this and create the stories and do these shows to comment on this stuff, it's been a challenge for years about what to cover as serious and what to, alligator Alcatraz on its face is the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but it actually has real consequences. So you have to cover it. You can't just make fun of it. And I don't know. We have to figure out the protest, or who do you call to make this very clear that it's a really abhorrent, um, anti-human impulse. To
Yeah,
to
and largely that's going to be the American people showing up. We are
Yeah,
not going to get Congress isn't gonna save us. We sure know that. And the president is not going to have a change of heart or find a heart, and start behaving like a normal human being because
No.
this all feeds him. This is what makes his heart
Yes.
feel better is when
Yeah.
he's doling out cruelty and feeling powerful. So it is going to take the American people showing up, contacting their members of Congress, even
Yep.
Democratic members of Congress, because
Yeah.
they need to be out there beating the drums all the time about just how incredibly abnormal it still has not sunk in for so many Americans that this is not the normal Republican and Democratic parties bickering over stuff and having
Yeah.
policy differences. We have one party in the United States that believes in having a democracy, and
Yeah.
that's the Democratic Party, and that is not normal.
It's not normal, and I think that, our electeds are, uh I'm frustrated with so many of them, obviously, as all of us are, and I think, there are definitely procedural, um, ways to fight this that only they can do that we can't do, but Trump doesn't care about procedure.
Right.
Their voice has to be loud. They have to lead a movement. They really have to lead a movement. Um,
I also
to
think it's reasonable to be demanding more the of legacy media.
Yes.
We can put pressure, on the media. They still do have a voice out there. You're probably not gonna be able to change what's being said on Fox, but there are other cable news channels, there are newspapers, there are still news magazines, and the the degree of, um, both sidesisms, and we need to, be unbiased is still such a it's at such a disgustingly high point still. I read so many of these stories of, like, how how are you just presenting what the Republican Party, what Trump is doing
Yep.
as, this is just their take on an issue.
Yeah. Oh, Trump's just thinking outside of the box.
Yeah,
Like, what? What are you
yeah,
talking about? And
yeah.
I think,
Some people disagree. Like, n no, it's not just that some people disagree,
no.
it's unconstitutional, it's illegal. I don't care if the president can't be prosecuted for things because of what the Supreme Court did with presidential immunity. That doesn't mean that these things aren't still illegal, and you've got the way people are going to, whether in addition to all of us being out there talking to our friends and talking to our families, even if they are sick of hearing about it,
Yep.
we need to continue making sure people are getting educated about what's going on. But we also have to demand that. There's a reason we have a First Amendment, and I would
Yep.
appreciate it if mainstream media used it a little more.
Yeah, I have, a couple of friends who, they're like, man, I don't wanna cross the border because I've said some stuff on social media." What kind of world is that?
Yeah.
Right? You could say whatever you want, and we all need to keep doing it. Um, be
Censoring
careful.
ourselves is not the answer.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Um, uh, what oh, man, I had a oh, I was gonna say this, this sort of Wild West of Substack has been really revelatory because, we talked to, people who have come out of mainstream media, and traditional media outlets, who feel the same way. I mean, you're part of this big machine, and it has a tone and it has a grammar and it has a sort of style that is just how you do things. I don't always blame reporters of the people doing that work, because when they come out they're like, yeah, oh, that was crazy, but it's also why we're building Lincoln Square.
Right. Right.
It's
There have
exactly.
to be media organizations like Lincoln Square, um, willing to just tell the unvarnished truth,
Yep.
and that's not political, it's not partisan. The
Nope.
truth that we are at a point now where if you are committed to telling the truth, people assume you're a Democrat.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that doesn't say something to people who still align themselves with the Republican Party. I just find baffling. Like, you what is that saying about the party that you're a member of if you think that people who tell the truth must be Democrats?
Totally.
How can you
I mean,
identify as a Republican?
I heard somebody say, the Bulwark does incredible work, Midas does incredible work, Contrarian, there's so many, but I heard somebody the other day say, um, "Oh, yeah, all those crazy progressives at the Bulwark," and I was like, I don't know about that." Like, what are you talking about? Um,
I'm
they're
not sure Bill
definitely
Kristol considers himself a progressive.
no. No, but it proves the point, like,
Yeah,
oh, if you are arguing for reason and rationality, then you must be a Democrat
yeah.
or progressive or some leftist. But I digress. One other story where we want to keep an eye on this week is the budget bill. The reconciliation bill is cruising through. They want to get it done by the 4th of July, which is on Friday, by the way. And right now they're going through Votorama, which is the procedure where anyone can bring up as many amendments as they want, and they get a very quick, minute long debate roughly, and then a sort of up or down vote. And mostly this is for messaging, really. But it's going to be interesting to watch that messaging. I mean, messaging right now, with the conversation we're just having, messaging is so much. So it's getting the Republicans to take a stand on particular amendments. That's a message. Calling out your own priorities. That's a message. Um, what's your take on this budget? And I mean, I know your take on the budget. This budget sucks. This is the worst
Budget sucks. Yeah.
funneling of wealth from the bottom to the top in probably history. Um, but do you think they'll get it through by the 4th?
Um, I don't know. I it's always a little unnerving when there's someone who has upset and offended me so deeply for so long, who I all of a sudden think, wow, that was a courageous thing to do. But Tom Tillis got me over the weekend, that he was willing to speak out in opposition to
Yeah.
the Medicaid cuts. And of course, immediately Trump threatened to have him primaried. And Tillis's response was, fine, I am not running for reelection, and I'm going
Yeah.
to spend the rest of my term being able to say what I actually think. So we'll see whether or not that really happens. But what this bill does to um, decimate Medicaid and SNAP. They're the estimate is Medicaid's going to be cut by 18%,
Yeah.
and SNAP benefits by 20%. And yeah, I pulled up some stats to qualify right now for SNAP benefits.
Hmm.
You can be at the cutoff is 130% of poverty. For an individual, that's $1,580 income a month.
My
For
gosh.
a family of four, it's $3,200. So we're talking about anybody who makes over $39,000 who is part of a family of four, they already are cut off. Those are working people. These are people putting in these, for Medicaid, putting in these work requirements. Um, it is more theater because they
Yep.
want to be able to make it seem as though Medicaid and SNAP recipients are lazy
Yeah.
and unwilling to work, and they're just sitting around living off the government dole. And that is such bullshit. Most people who receive Medicaid and SNAP benefits are working people, or they are disabled, or they are caring for a severely disabled child. Um, and those cuts are not going to only impact Medicaid recipients because we know a lot of these rural hospitals that we have rural hospitals in my state of Vermont, but there are even more in poor red states. And those
Yeah.
rural hospitals are going to close.
E
And those hospitals don't just serve Medicaid
No.
recipients. They serve entire communities. And we're talking about needing to travel hours to get to another hospital, and if someone's having a heart attack or a stroke or an emergency in a pregnancy, a couple of hours is the difference between life and death or life and
It
permanent disability. And they don't care.
I think I when and this is maybe a little too personal, but when I was a kid, my family fell in some hard times, and we went without electricity for about a year. We didn't have a phone for a couple of years. I'd have to go to the quick shop and call the ladies when I was 12, and tell them I had crushes on them that way. But that was a humiliation that nobody should have to suffer, and millions of people do. They live that life every day. I was fortunate because in Red, Kansas, where I grew up, there was a clinic, a free clinic that was attached to the school essentially, where I could get my physicals so that I could still play sports, so that I could, take part in those kinds of activities, and that was a lifeline. If that hadn't happened for me, none of those other like there are gateway resources that lead to other resources, that lead to other resources that continue on upward. And one problem is we hit hard times. We came from good times and then hit hard times. There are people who start in hard times.
Right.
They don't know about the the ensuing resources. They don't know what's available to them. They're not going to know about Pell grants. They're not going to know about right because they can't get into the fucking clinic to get to the next step. And so it's not just, we talk about all the people dying, and that's absolutely essential. But you have to remember poverty is, last generations, right? And this is the world you're putting in. You want to, like this, make America healthy again. They're focusing on red dyes. They should be focusing on income inequality and poverty. You want to make
Right.
people healthy? Give them a nice meal.
Well, and combine what Kennedy is doing with vaccines
Mm,
with rural hospitals closing. We already know that we have a crisis across the country getting primary care doctors. So when the measles outbreaks spread,
yeah.
it's happening more in rural
Oh,
communities. And where the hell are these people going to go?
nowhere. That's it.
We're going to cut back on who can receive flu vaccinations. Because they're just going to be much more difficult to be able to create and preserve and have multi-use
Yep.
vials and all of that Kennedy's getting rid of. So we are setting ourselves up for a really dangerous flu season. Thousands of people die of the flu every year. We don't
Yeah.
talk about it, but people die from this, and they
Yeah.
tend to be young children and elderly people. And we're gonna make medical care more difficult to get.
To
It's
get
just
yeah. And Ben says, so what are we going to do about it? We're going to raise hell. That's it. Like as SCOTUS on Friday demonstrated yet again, there's no procedural backstop. Right?
right.
They're dismantling all of the checks and all of the balances. And so Ben, we've got to show up. Like this has to be from the bottom up. And I think, whatever you think about Mom Donnie's politics, there should be something interesting in that for all of us in that he walked the length of Manhattan. He talked to people. He said, "What is it that you're interested in?" And you see politicians saying, um, if you don't get my policy, it's your own fault. You're just not paying attention, or you need to educate yourself on why my policy is better, and that's frustrating. All of this comes from bottom up. It's man, Lisa, there's so much to talk about. uh,
Yeah, I know,
uh,
and we're already over.
we're
Um,
already over. I wanted to give just this Monday show is always about like I said, clearing the decks, getting ready for the week ahead, letting everyone know, really reconnecting after a weekend,
yep,
if you will. Just getting with our people and
and
talking.
hopefully charging people up because it's another week. It's another week of work, and it's
Yeah,
another week of potential to be able to make a difference. So I hope
yes,
people come into Mondays feeling as though maybe it didn't go right last week. We have another week. And
yeah,
the public outcry, especially when you can reach some of the moderate Republicans who start pushing back, or you reach some MAGA folks who
yep,
didn't understand that their Medicaid was going to be, um, is on the chopping block. When those people start speaking out, it
yes,
makes an impact on what Trump does. We've seen so many times the guy does look at his polls. This stuff, it
he does.
matters to him. So public sentiment is huge. And the way public sentiment shifts is by people being educated and seeing people in the streets and
Yep,
attending the town halls or demanding that town halls be held if your
yes,
representatives aren't holding those.
yep.
Hold them even if they won't show up. That says something too. So,
It,
there
yeah,
are things to be doing. Call your members of Congress this week.
five
They are
calls.
voting on this horrific. Yes, fivecalls.org.
Yep. Robert posted a link in the chat. Robert, if we're gonna repost this conversation, if you could go in the comments of that and post that link, I'd love to read it. Um uh yeah, I'm despite all of this craziness, I'm actually quite hopeful.
Yeah,
uh
me too.
because I believe in us and I believe in these people in the chat and I believe in the people who subscribe and I believe in my community and I'm having more face to face, maybe it's summer, right? But conversations, people are pissed
Yeah,
and we need to use that righteous anger. I let's go through we got a banger week this week at Lincoln Square is wild and which is crazy because we're going into the 4th of July and just as like a from a producer standpoint, I hate July because it's true because you get some people are available for, shows and some aren't. People go on vacation, but also the audience just drops off. We're all
yeah,
outside frolicking and democracy is just magically saved for the month and
yeah.
so I hope that everyone is able to go frolic because it's very important, but do check back in. We have some amazing shows this week. Edwin Eisendrath later today. Stewart is talking to Simon Rosenberg about Votorama and the budget bill, and Simon's input is
Amazing.
gold standard. I'm hoping, and I imagine they'll also talk about the opening up of the Tilla seat in North Carolina because I think that's going to be a big story over the
Yeah,
next 18 months.
yeah,
Is he up in 26?
yeah.
Amazing. So we got to look at that. That's like everyone in the chat who's asking what we can do. That's one thing we can do. Flip seats. Flip, flip, flip. We have Leah Littman on tomorrow to talk more about all the SCOTUS stuff. She's
Brilliant.
incredible. One of my like she's always so happy to come on, and I always feel a little starstruck about Leah Littman. I don't know why, because I'm a nerd, I guess. Um, Anchor Watch with Bobby Jones is tomorrow. It's amazing. We also, I'm in the process right now of scheduling Bobby to interview Tim Mack in Ukraine because that's another
Amazing.
thing that we can't take our eyes off of. And it gets buried because it's not here, but it's wildly important. It has huge global implications. We have Mark Jacob. We have Stephen Beschloss, who was in the chat earlier, maybe still there. I always love Stuart's conversation with Stephen. Um, Amazing. You'll be back
And
with
Mark Jacob is an incredible media critic. He is
incredible.
tune in for that.
Yeah, he's another one that I'm always like, if I'm emailing with him, I'm like, I'm emailing Mark Jacob.
I know.
Like, this is why I do this. It's super fun.
I know, we're such nerds.
Yeah. Lisa, you'll be back with Andrew Watkins and David Pepper this week. Those are going to be good. We have Jake Woe coming on with Rick, Harry Littman coming on with Rick,
Fantastic.
uh, and then the fourth guys in the chat. I know, Robert. I'm on so many Substacks. I'm overdosing. I absolutely hear you. The emails are wild. We try to limit emails as much as possible, because it is like bombing everyone's inbox, including mine from all the Substacks I subscribe to. Um, so be sure you check in on the app or come onto the website and just every once in a while see what's happening. And if you subscribe, we promise to try to limit the emails. I mean, Substack kind of defaults to sending just bombing your system with emails. I think they're gonna have to figure that out because Substack, when it's becoming so popular,
It's a lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot. We are you can also check us out on YouTube, and I think we'll be doing more and more on YouTube in the near future. Um, Guys, I also want to hear what you guys are doing for the 4th of July. So maybe in the comments, or maybe I'll make a new post, and I'd love to see pics. It always fills me with some kind of hope. Um,
Yeah, and connected to the 4th, though I think it's good all the time now. Um, a couple of weeks ago, because my flagpole on the side of my house had broken in a windstorm, put put a new pole back up, and I have my American flag, and I have my Ukrainian flag, and I have my pride flag. And I think it's so important to not allow the right has really co-opted the American flag.
yeah.
And it is, at protests, at gatherings, it is more difficult for bad actors, whether they are individuals or whether it's the government.
Yes.
If it is a sea of American flags, that looks bad on television. It plus it's ours.
Yeah.
And people who believe in democracy and love this country for the potential that it has, that's our flag. That is not an authoritarian flag. So
No.
encourage everybody, put it up proudly, because we need to be taking that back. That's our symbol
It's our jersey, right? It's our Celtics jersey for all of
for
you
sure.
Boston fans. But much more important than that. Sorry, Lisa, but it is. I
It
know you're a
hurts a
Celtics fan.
little every time somebody mentions the Celtics, but
I know. I'm
we're
sorry.
going to
It's
come
all
back next year.
really will. Okay, well, everyone, we have kept you long enough. We have a big day on Lincoln Square. Keep checking back. Also, leave that. I can't remember who it was, but leave that link. It looked like an interesting Substack link in the comments. I'll have this post up in an hour or so. Lisa, thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank
Always so good
you.
to talk to you. And thank
Yeah,
you in
you
the chat.
too. Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks everybody for being here.
Have a great week.
Bye bye.
Bye.